Tonight, the parents of a woman who committed suicide by drinking antifreeze have criticised hospital doctors for not attempting to revive her.
Kerry Wooltorton was 26 when she died at the Norfolk and Norwich hospital. She told medical staff she didn't want treatment and in a so-called living will also gave them written instructions that she should be allowed to die. Alex Dunlop reports.
Kerry Wooltorton had a troubled childhood and had suffered mental health problems. She had already tried to commit suicide 9 times before by drinking antifreeze, when 2 years ago she collapsed for the last time at her home in Norwich. Her neighbour Donna Dyker discovered Kerry just inside her front door.
She was very cold, but she was alive, lucky enough. And so the neighbour downstairs from her actually rang the ambulance.
Did you realise what she might have done?
Well, I think so, because she had attempted before, and I was told that she had taken antifreeze, I believe, a couple of times, 2 or 3 times.
Paramedics rushed Kerry to the Norfolk and Norwich hospital. She had with her a so-called living will. Doctors then realised they had to respect her wishes or face charges of assault. Kerry's instructions were explicit. If I come into hospital regarding an overdose or any attempt on my life, I would like for no life-saving treatment to be given. She wanted drugs to ease the pain. There are loads of reasons I do not want to die at home, she wrote, which I realise you will not understand.
It would be quite wrong, and all doctors would accept this, to impose a treatment that the patient didn't want. So although a doctor might be in a very uncomfortable position, as indeed would all the staff looking after a patient who was asking to die, I do think they have a fundamental obligation to respect the patient's desires.
But Kerry Wooltorton's family and friends are appalled that doctors didn't intervene. They say it amounts to assisted suicide.
The way it happened, it shouldn't have happened. It shouldn't have been allowed to happen. But she was taken to hospital and they just assisted her to die. Basically, it shouldn't have been done.
But the local coroner, William Armstrong, said of Kerry's death, a deliberate decision to die may appear repugnant, but any treatment to have saved her life in the absence of her consent would have been unlawful.
The hospital says that even if she hadn't written out a living will, they would still have respected her wish to die, because she was both conscious and of sound mind.
But Kerry Wooltorton's family strongly disagree. They told me tonight they're now considering civil action against the hospital. Alex Dunlop, BBC Look East, Norwich.
Well, earlier I spoke to Dr Anna Smydor, a lecturer in medical ethics at the University of East Anglia, and I asked her what she thought of the decision the doctors had made.
I think in this particular situation the doctors really had very little choice. They were confronted with an advance directive, as well as the patient expressing verbally her refusal of treatment. And I think if doctors had contravened her written and her verbal wishes, they could have been in legal trouble. So their hands were forced, as it were, and I think it's a very unpleasant position for them to be in, but they really couldn't have done otherwise.
When we think of situations like this, it's normally in cases of terminal illness, but this is a suicide. And how can someone be judged to be competent at making a decision about whether they want to live or die after they've actually tried to commit suicide?
The act of trying to kill yourself, for a lot of people, that must mean, well, the person is lacking mental capacity. It shows that they're suffering so much that they're not thinking rationally. And I think this is a very philosophical question. Perhaps we don't really have a good answer to it. But certainly in our medical system and our legal framework, the fact that you don't want to live any longer is not sufficient to make us assume that the person is deranged or lacking mental capacity to make choices about their treatment.
But for doctors, they take the Hippocratic Oath. They're meant to try and save people. To actually put them in that position, is that fair?
I don't think it is fair, really. I think it's very hard on doctors. And I think in this particular case, in some respects, although it's a tragic case, it's been quite clear-cut because the patient was able to say, yes, that these are my wishes, please follow them. But the law would also allow for a situation where a woman's brought in unconscious with that advance directive and she's not able to say yes or no. And in theory, the law would then also oblige doctors to follow her wishes and not resuscitate her. And that's a very problematic situation. I think perhaps the law has expanded into areas that weren't envisaged initially.
Does that mean, really, that this isn't an area for legislation because it's impossible, really, to legislate over the right to die?
I think it's very hard to make the law work for all the areas it's supposed to cover, and this incident shows that. So I think it's very hard to respect, as it were, the rights of someone to commit suicide while also ensuring that vulnerable people don't find that they don't receive treatment. This legislation and this case, in a sense, forces doctors to be very cautious, to undergo certain investigative procedures before they actually start treatment. And I think that's a risky situation to be in.
Dr. Smidle, thank you very much.
Thank you.
A family has been speaking of their emptiness after their son fell from a tractor and died. Corey James was with his grandfather as he was cutting the grass on a playing field at Islip in Northamptonshire. Today, a coroner recorded a verdict of accidental death.
Sitting on a bench dedicated to his memory, his mother, father and grandfather at the playing fields where Corey James, aged 3.5, was fatally injured.
It is a huge hole in all of the whole family's life now. It's a massive void that we don't know how we're going to, fill. It's 3.5 years of just fun, joy, laughter. It's just gone.
Chris Mays, Corey's grandfather, had cut the grass here for free for many years. He used a tractor like this one, but with a cab, to pull the mower. Corey had ridden with him a few times before. The family thought it was safe.
He just forced himself. I'd got my left arm round him, holding him up, steering with his hand, so this hand was there on the steering wheel as well. But as you heard at the inquest, he was such a strong lad. He just pushed my arm away and he was out the door. It happened in a flash, and there was nothing I could do.
Corey suffered terrible head injuries and died soon after in hospital. His death recorded by the coroner as accidental.
The coroner today warned the general public to be cautious when taking children on machinery. She said clearly there are huge dangers, which in this case have led to tragic consequences.
No doubt a lot more people are going to be putting their kids on tractors and things like that, but hopefully more in a more safer environment, in a safer way. Nobody purposely puts a child in danger. Nobody, especially his grandfather.
The family say the inquest brings some sort of closure. They've been grieving. Now they hope the healing process will begin. Mike Cartwright, BBC Look East, Islip.